we definitely want to make sure our listeners and our veteran and active duty community that utilize that VA loan is abreast of these changes and why it's going to be important to them. Real estate is changing. 2025, we're coming into a whole new world because of some new legislation that passed in 2024 regarding the buyer broker fees. So today we're going to be discussing how these fees impact the VA loan and our veterans, active duty members, and their families that utilize those loans. So stay tuned while we get right into it. All right, so hello and welcome to the Prepare to Compete podcast, where we talk all things VA benefits, real estate, entrepreneurship, and more. Kenneth Davis, how you feeling today, my brother?
Oh, as you can understand and know, as he always hops on this podcast, ready to learn and ready to educate.
Absolutely, man. I'm glad we're here to learn and educate. We have this wonderful, important topic regarding changes, not necessarily with the VA loan, but how these changes with real estate actually impacts the VA loan. So we definitely want to make sure our listeners and our veteran and active duty community that utilize that VA loan is abreast of these changes and why it's going to be important to them.
When I tell you I'm excited, and let me tell you one of the reasons I'm excited. One, I know a lot of people that deal with VA loans, and I can almost assure that they need to be watching this, okay? But two, I'm a veteran myself. I need to know and understand the ins and outs of the VA home loan benefit, because guess what? My entitlement to my benefit, we're going to be using him. So we're going to be using it here soon. So this is real life case study.
Definitely.
Let's get into it, man.
Yeah, and so, a lot of times we don't ever want to make assumptions about what the people know, right? So we want to start here from a basic level of just talking about what is the VA home loan program and from a basic sense of kind of introducing you to that. So obviously the VA loan is a program that helps veterans, active duty service members, and surviving spouses purchase homes. You're able to do so with no down payment and no private mortgage insurance, okay? Which is a huge benefit to those individuals that qualify, because the private mortgage payment alone is a barrier in qualifying, because that could add hundreds of dollars to your payment. And of course, having a down payment of thousands of dollars definitely is a barrier as well. So the VA loan eliminates those barriers for qualifying individuals for this loan product here.
And when we're talking about the VA loan, I always want to make sure that veterans and active duty members repeat, this is qualifying for you, active duty, veteran, surviving spouse. You just said it in the first bullet point. Make sure you understand and make sure you take advantage. You guys, this is one of the most powerful mortgage tools on the market. Don't let it pass you by.
Absolutely. And there are some different things that are changing in real estate in general that's impacting the qualifications and how you're able to utilize that loan program. So now when we're talking about the buyer broker fees, okay, so there was a big lawsuit, and I know we talked about it in a prior video, and it was a very nuanced of what was going to happen, right? With a lot of new things that actually just started in August of 2024 in regards to it. So, basically sellers had a lawsuit, property sellers of, it was a transparency issue of like, hey, who is paying the commissions for the seller's agent, the person selling the property, and the buyer's agent, the person buying the property. For whatever reason, the sellers assume that they were only paying the commission for their hired agent. They didn't realize that they were paying the commissions for the agent that was representing the buyer of their home. So that led to a lawsuit, which led to new legislation that now all of these fees need to be disclosed, and more so now they need to be split up so everybody pays their own way. Okay, so the seller's agent is paid by the seller of that property, and the buyer's agent is paid by the person that hired them, the buyer of that property. So if Kenneth is going to look for a home, he hires me as his real estate agent, which I hope he would. He's going to pay me my commission. We're going to negotiate that commission, and it's not going to be a fixed amount that the listing agent of a property already predetermined. Me and Kenneth is going to have our own conversation about what compensation that I would like from him. Now, I could be nice and say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and not charge you, right? But chances are I'm not going to do that because I still need to feed my family. And ultimately, Kenneth wants me to do quality work. So somebody has to pay for that quality work. And based on these new changes, it should be him, is what they say.
So let me understand this a bit. So I'm purchasing a home. Hire a buyer's agent. Boom, you're hired. Now, are you saying that? And I want, and again, let's be, if we can, I want to be very transparent and blunt here. So, as a veteran, how is this affecting me at all?
It's affecting you because you planned on buying a house with no down payment, and you planned on asking the seller to pay your closing costs. Well, we'll get into it a little bit later and talk about the details of that. If you have to pay me a part of that, where's that money going to come from? Because you had no intention of actually giving any down payment, and the seller was going to pay your closing costs. So you don't have the $15,000 that I'm billing for the transaction.
Wow.
And, $15,000, frankly, is a lot of money there.
Oh, no, true indeed. No, okay, I'll let you continue because I have a lot of questions. Because now if I'm the veteran and this is my VA loan, well, this is going against my entitlement and my entitlement criteria. My entitlement criteria says there's no down payment allotted. And also, again, when we're talking about closing costs can be subjective.
Closing costs should be subjective, and now subjectively, this buyer's agent fee is something that's been added to closing costs, right? So what is the new policy? So that's what the new policy is, right? Now everybody has to pay their own agent. So veterans using the VA loan, however, they can negotiate and actually pay their real estate agent commission, or call it the buyer broker fee, right? So they're able to do that now. So what Kenneth was alluding to is that the VA had a lot of protections to keep junk fees and any sort of fees away from the veteran or from the VA loan borrower. And I always like to say VA loan borrower because I want to overly stress that the person may not be the veteran themselves. It could be a surviving spouse. It could be an active duty member as well, right? So I always try to reemphasize that point. So the VA loan borrower could now make that qualified payment if they choose to, because now, again, everything's negotiable. So you could say, hey, if I'm charging you a fee, let's say it could be a percentage of 1%, 2%, 3%, or it could be a flat rate. You may not want to agree to pay that fee, that's okay. Then now you have to either look for yourself another agent, or we come back to the table, renegotiate, and that's what's happening in a lot of cases. What happens sometimes is that myself as the agent would say, hey, I want a flat rate of maybe $1,000 to say, hey, I'm going to show you about 35, 40 houses. I need to at least get compensated for my gas, right? just in case, something goes wrong with the transaction and you don't buy.
Yeah.
And if you do buy, I'll try to work out my commission with the seller because I can still do that part, right? I can still do that. Now, the seller doesn't have to offer me a commission, and that's kind of the nuance change. But ultimately, the seller wants buyer agents to bring buyers. They want buyers, and they're going to have to pay a commission a lot of times to get the buyers.
To entice the buyers.
Yeah, to entice the buyers. So, that's why, frankly, as experienced agents, we don't really see the point of this policy in real practice because right now a lot of the same things are happening. Again, as it kind of goes on longer, it may change, but for the most part, in 80-90% of the transactions, the seller is still agreeing to pay the buyer's broker fee. But now the disclosures are a lot more, and it's a lot more nuanced now. With they have to come up with their own agreement when they're listing the contract, that those agreements on who's being paid is not going to be, it's not a co-op anymore. Because what happened before is that it was called a co-op in that it was just one flat number. Let's say, again, we don't do any price fixing ever. So don't ever think that number is a standard number because it's not. A lot of people say, oh, it's 6%, 3 and 3 is split, or, some people say 5% and it's split 2.5, 2.5. Well, it's not that way, but that's how it's always been presented to the seller. It's like, oh, you're paying me 6% to sell your property. Well, they didn't know half of that money was going towards the buyer's agent, right? It's like, oh, I thought I paid you 6%. So then and when you really think about that, we just use round numbers here. Let's say that 6% equaled $50,000. So me as the seller, if I'm the seller of a home hiring an agent, I'm thinking I'm paid this person $50,000. But really I paid them $25 because they gave $25 away to the other person that procured a buyer for that property to entice them. So, that's the nuance. And the other part, it was just agents really, doing some kind of despicable things, right? In that where they may have thought like, okay, hey, I realized because I'm educated and you educated me that this 50,000 is being split, but I'm thinking you giving 25 to the other party, but you're really keeping 40,000 and only offering them 10,000, which made it take longer for me to sell my house because the money was all pooled together and you made me think one thing, but in practice you did another, right? So part of this new policy was to kind of clear that up and say, hey, we're going to separate that and we're going to have more transparency. So although I don't completely like it as an agent because it made situations a little bit more convoluted, I do agree with the fact that there needed to be more transparency on who was paying what and how that was facilitated in the transaction. And, to regular buyers, it made people think like, oh, these agents are making a whole lot of money when they not realizing it's like, hey, the broker got to get their cut of that. I got to pay, there's a lot of people need to get paid with that same money.
No, true indeed. I guess because again, I think when we're talking about this in fashion, I want everybody to kind of understand that as we're speaking about this, we're speaking about it from 3 standpoints, right? We have the VA home loan entitlement borrower, okay? Then we have also the buyer's agent and we have the seller's agent. So the buyer's agent, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, it looks as though that originally when we came into the transaction of the home buying process as a veteran or VA home loan entitlement user or borrower, there was basically one set flat fee in place, right? And now it's up to us to negotiate, to go ahead and discuss that, versus you and the seller's agent.
Correct.
Okay.
So, correct in a lot of elements there because the issue is that there was never a conversation regarding any type of payment between the buyer's agent and the buyer because they always relied on the seller to pay them their commission of whatever they were going to make. So when you hire me as your agent, as a buyer, you get to roll around in my car. I might take you to lunch. I might do all that with the pretense that once we find a house, the owner of that house is going to pay me a commission for bringing you to that property and procuring that deal. So I never talked to you about how much I'm going to make or anything of that nature because the assumption was always, oh, the seller is going to pay me. Now, could that still be the case? It could be the case, and overwhelmingly it's still the case, but it's not necessarily going to happen. And then that amount is just continuing to be reduced. Again, at one point, it was the standard to get 3% on each side. Then it's 2.5%. Then you seeing some 2%. So it's continuing to change, and I think this new policy is going to continue to refine how those payments are going to go.
Yeah, because it was always a standardized, right? Whatever the percentage was kind of automatically assumed.
Yeah, it was automatically assumed. It can't be standard, right? Because that's price fixing.
Well, no. I was saying in previous practices, it was a general, because it can be anything.
Yeah, it could be any number, but yeah, it was always set. It's like, hey, I can't ask Kenneth as me representing him as an agent to pay me any amount because it's going to be based on what that particular seller is offering. Exactly. Whether that's, they're going to offer me 3%, 2.5%, whatever. I'm not going to, worry about that. But some agents actually, funny enough, they would do, again, things that they shouldn't do in that they may not show their buyer a house unless it was a 3% commission, which is absolutely, unlawful for them to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously it's geared towards their financial gain and also just gain just in general and being able to sell. So I can see why something like that happens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And now, again, if they disclose that to you, it's like, hey, Kenneth, I need to make at least 3% on this commission. If they offering 2.5%, are you going to pay me the additional 0.5%? And now if you agree to that, that's one thing. But if I just decide on my own without having that conversation and having that in writing with you that that was going to be the case, then that's unethical and that's against the realtor code of ethics for me to do that.
Well, and I just want to take it a step back a bit. And I want to come into this as a first-time home buyer, and just so I can understand fully, what am I doing with my agent? So I come in, I get pre-approved, ready to go buy. Now, after being ready to purchase and so on, now I am looking for an agent. Mr. Jones, you're my agent. We like what you've done with a few of our other veteran friends, and we want to be able to, hopefully, be able to obviously purchase as well. Can you do so? Yes? Okay. What happens now in relation to the fees that every veteran should know or every VA home loan borrower should know?
Absolutely. So what's going to happen now is that I'm going to want to have to get you into what we call a buyer-broker agreement, which those documents were available before. However, a lot of people didn't use them, right? Because basically what it was used for before is for you to only be able to shop with me, right? So basically, if you're looking for a home, you agree to say, hey, you're hiring me as your agent, and I'm going to help you find a property, and you cannot work with anybody else for whatever period of time we stated, right? So that agreement form has been refined and more detailed to include any type of fees that I'm going to be charging for the transaction, okay? So that's what's going to be nuanced there. It's going to say, hey, if we find a property that is not offering me a commission, you agree to pay me X amount of dollars.
Boom, right there. Me as the VA buyer. Now, Where did this money come from?
Good question. Good question. Where is it going to come from? So when we'll get to that in here, but the cleanest way is for it to come from your pocket.
Okay. Well. Let's figure this out. So now, okay. So as utilizing the VA home loan, there fees, right? We typically have closing costs. You have taxes. You have even some of the junk fees that these other organizations and lenders charge. We have again notary fees. We have all types of fees, credit report fees. So now, is this something that is available to be paid once upon closing of the home within my loan amount that is rendered?
Yeah, it could be added towards your closing cost of the home.
It can be added towards the closing cost of the home. I think that's one of the most important things for the buyer, because now, let's say if I'm shopping at the top of my loan limit, that's coming into play. I want this home. I need this home. Now, as the buyer's agent, where are we in the course of purchasing in relation to fees?
In relation to when this is being brought up, the conversation?
Well, not necessarily the conversation, in relation to the fees on how this is going to get paid. I'm at the top of my loan limit.
Okay, yeah. If you're at the top of your loan limit, well, because there's two things with that, right? So it's you being at the top of your loan limit, and it's also the house, right? Because let's say you're at the top of your loan limit, that's $500,000, and the house is $500,000. Well, you have an issue here, right? So if added to your closing cost, it would be assumed that in that scenario you would have to pay those additional fees at closing. Because I think what you're referring to is, can you add it to the actual loan, right? Because that would be something that you would be interested in doing. Well, to be able to add it to the loan, not only do you have to have eligibility in terms of your qualification, but the house actually has to appraise for that amount. So then you're subject to worrying about the appraisal, because if you are, whether you're at your top of your budget or not, and the house is $500,000 and it's worth $500,000, and you got to add another $15,000 to it, well, you couldn't get the loan for $515 anyway, because it's not worth $515.
Exactly. So that's, I guess, and the only reason I bring this up is because a lot of our veterans, we understand that many of them are first-time home buyers, and going through this process can be very difficult for them already. So now the stress of negotiation of a agent who is, one, phenomenal, but we just can't afford the fees that you're going to charge. Well, if I am a veteran who is intensely wanting to search a property for my family because I spent the last 20 years out to sea, moving my family from place to place to place, and I want someone to call home, but now I have to deal with the stress of this market. Could you give us some advice?
Absolutely. Definitely want to give you some advice on how to navigate the new market, right? So, you want to try to negotiate with the broker fees, okay? You want to negotiate with your real estate agent so that you avoid those surprises. You want to usually have your real estate professional and your lender really working as a team, right? Because now they're able to look at the nuances of those situations and how it may play out in advance. Can you get it added to your closing costs, which we'll talk a little bit more about? Can we look for some other ways to fund this as far as certain lender credits and different things of that nature, right? So there's a lot of creativity that can happen behind the scenes to get it covered where it's not directly coming out of your pocket, because, one interesting part that we're kind of alluding to is that, hey, if you're active duty, there's a funding fee, right? Then there's a funding fee, there's a lot of other fees. Your lender is charging you fees. All of these different things are being added to your loan, but a lot of these things don't have to actually go and be looked at as part of like the appraised value of the property and different things of that nature. So once you get creative with the buyer broker fee and negotiating and communicating early, you avoid those surprises and you're able to do more of those nuanced things. So we never want this to be a hindrance for you to purchase a home. So I don't think this is not going to be a hindrance, right? There's so many strategies to deal with still being able to purchase the home that you don't have to worry about it, but you need to be educated that it's there. You know, just the same way as the other fees don't get in the way of you purchasing a home, this fee won't get in the way either. You just have to be educated.
And that is key, right? And I always wanted to make sure we talked about that. I wanted to speak about that because I'll tell you right now, there's so many veterans that may think they can't purchase a home, and this is just another added obstacle that's going to put them in a position where they're not in a position of success and power and owning a home, right? Being able to own a home is just something a little bit more secure than renting, right? So veterans, you can do it. There are opportunities out there. There's down payment assistance programs, right, that you can put on top of your VA home loan product. Okay, there's so many different financial tools that can be able to assist you to get you in the home that you deserve. Don't let this pass you by. Join the community to find additional strategies and additional information, and also, again, our real estate advisor, which again he has advised many veterans and really a subject matter expert. So we're really excited to continue.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then now we're going to get into kind of some examples of how the home purchase and get into those scenarios that we're talking about, but also the wonderful part of just how this can actually play out in your favor in a lot of ways. Okay, so let's say the VA loan purchaser looking to purchase the home with their VA loan, and they're going to be faced with this fee for the first time. So obviously you want to negotiate the fees, and you want to negotiate all fees. You want to always keep fees to a minimum and really kind of question everything that's going down. You definitely, if you can, maybe avoid not having a down payment. You don't have that PMI. But the seller concession, okay? The seller concession is an avenue where you can utilize covering this fee, okay? So with the VA loan currently, and like it says there, the amount should be raised with this new thing here, right? But they can contribute up to 4% of your loan amount for your closing costs, which now this is a closing cost for you. So if your agent is looking to charge you 2%, well, now that you can ask the seller for a concession of 2% to be able to go ahead and fund that for you. However, I wouldn't actually do it that way, right? Because I, as your agent looking out for you in the best way possible, I want you to be able to utilize your seller concessions because it is limited to a number for your closing costs that, hey, we can't do anything about these costs, right? Can't do anything about certain lender fees. We can't do anything about the title company fees, your appraisals, inspections, all these different things. Some of those things are prepaid, but a lot of these fees are going to be added to the loan. And we want you to ultimately be able to use the seller concession for that, even to buy down the interest rate, right? Because, another thing that I know that Kenneth talked about as an example of being at the top of your budget. Well, newsflash here, if you buy down the interest rate with the seller concession, you can actually increase your loan amount on that property, which is a very, very powerful tool to be able to purchase the home that you're looking up for.
Nice. Listen, there is so many creative ways to kind of get around, this additional fee. But again, it's not an additional fee. Don't look at it as that. It is simply just the same cost to you typically, right? Just figuring out how to navigate it, but not navigate it successfully. So one, as a veteran, it's not coming out your pocket. And we try so hard to be able to strategize to do that. But number two, making sure you're able to provide yourself a successful pathway of home ownership without the hiccups of not understanding the concession portion, seller concession, not understanding DPAs, not understanding what these fees are. This is why you're here, to get the information. Please understand that is simply, there's a workaround. It is not something that is blocking you to success.
Absolutely. Definitely not blocking you from success. And again, that's why you want to work with qualified professionals because, from my vantage point and even the seller's vantage point, if they're going to offer you a concession of 3-4%, they don't care what that concession is because all they're concerned about is their bottom line, right? So I don't want to max out your concession with my fee. I'll just go and negotiate, say, hey, Kenneth wants to buy this home. You weren't offering a commission. He needs that 4% to be a concession to buy down his interest rate, to make the property more affordable, and to pay for his closing costs. However, I still need to be compensated here. I want to negotiate Kenneth a 4% concession, the seller credit, and I want to negotiate myself in the offer a 2%, 2.5% a commission, right? So we can do those things separately. So now Kenneth still gets to use his 4% eligibility for the seller concession to fund the things that he needs to fund, and the seller is still going to pay me my commission, and then now everybody walks away from the deal happy because now Kenneth gets his home, and the bottom line with the seller is that they're concerned about getting their net number of how much they're bringing home. And that's where, a lot of times it gets very nuanced, and again, that's why professionals are very important, high-level professionals, because that's all they care about. It's like, hey, yeah, I'm selling this home for $500,000, but I owe $200,000 on the home. I'm gonna get roughly, $250,000 after I pay all my fees. It's like they got a lot of room to eat in that scenario, right? So giving me an extra $10,000 or so to make sure that property is sold, they'll rather do that because they don't want to go pay that mortgage for another month or two and leave that home on the market, right? So it's just about negotiation. It's about transparency. So a lot more transparency and a lot more difficult conversations are being had on both sides now because everybody has to talk about the numbers, right? And how much people are getting paid and negotiating that. And then, ethical points of how much am I going to push? Because maybe I try to ask for them to give me 3%, and they're like, well, no, I could give Ken a 4%, and I could give you 2%. And it's like, well, we'll take a percentage from Kenneth and we get 3. It's like, well, no, that's not in the best interest of my client, so I shouldn't be doing that. But now that's going to be transparent in that, right? Because now we have to write the offer in that way. I wrote an offer that said 4% seller concession and 3% for me, and they countered and said 4% for Kenneth and 2 for me. And instead of before, it would be a backhanded deal where, okay, they want to pay a total of 6%. It's like, oh, great, Kenneth, guess what? They offered you 3% for seller concession. You're so happy about that, but you didn't know they really were willing to give you 4%, but I took that extra 1% to put it in my pocket.
Wow. The real estate game is always a little tricky.
Yeah, it's always a little tricky, yeah.
But you really touched on something that I want to always make sure that we reiterate here. At Veterans for Veterans, it's the fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the veteran veteran buyer is always protected. That responsibility is number one.
Absolutely.
Because we're here to serve. We're here to serve. Just because we're talking about a different entitlement to you, it doesn't change. We're here to serve. So with that said, you made a great point there. But I did want to also touch on This is so informative for agents, lenders, title companies, just everyone, because now you understand how to negotiate without, again, dropping or losing the deal. How,
Yes.
if you don't have this information, how are you able to negotiate? A lot of people are going to go to the most common facets, right? Oh well, you can one first off, you can one put more of a down payment, which veterans that's something that we won't make sure we stress at all. Okay, but there's so many creative strategies that has not been used and is only going to come with vetted and years of experience. So join the community. You're going to get a lot of that there.
Absolutely. You're going to get a lot of resources, right? Because we have resources for veterans here, and of course on the VA website, they have a lot of resources about this information as well. So definitely not only take our word for it, look in the details, right? We're giving you the overview of all this information, and this information is ever changing, okay? We're putting this information out in late 2024. You may be watching this in 2025, 2026, and the policies and the nuances of this program have changed, maybe even went away, right? So you want to always look at the new regulatory information. The VA has the VA has their information on their website regarding the loan guarantee service. So check that information out. It's going to have the different details regarding what you need to do for these programs. Again, we cannot stress enough, reach out to experienced real estate agents who specialize in VA loans, okay? Those are going to be the individuals that are going to guide you through this process, because frankly, agents are sometimes so happy to get a buyer. They're like, yeah, I can help you with your VA loan. It's the same as the FHA or a regular house. And as Kenneth could attest, no, it's not.
Ooh, yeah, the VA is a little bit different, and it's a whole guide, handbook, and also ebook that we produce for your information to know that the VA loan is different. But that's exciting, man. That's exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. So, yeah, again, stay abreast of these resources. Definitely thank you guys for watching. Thank you for tuning in here. Reach out with any questions that you have. Our number here is listed on the screen. And as always, prepare to compete. We're out. Peace.